Hi everyone. So today I will talk about the Bhagavad Gita. It is the only epic in my series that is nested within a much larger epic. Every other epic that I'm talking about in this series are all individual, standalone epics. They could be part of a similar tradition to another one, but all of them are standalones. The Bhagavad Gita is the only one that is part of the much larger epic, the Mahabharata, which has its own video. The Mahabharata is the longest epic in the world. It has the most number of lines of poetry for one collected work. The Bhagavad Gita is just all-encompassing. It encompasses everything, as much as one book possibly could. And that's what's amazing about it. And all of this, basically cosmos and everything that makes up the cosmos and the world and life, ways of living, everything, all of it is housing this one tiny conversation called the Bhagavad Gita. Now the Bhagavad Gita is just one tiny short conversation, but it takes place in the middle of a battlefield during one of the emotionally intense scenes for the Mahabharata. So the Bhagavad Gita can be studied alone. You don't need to read the full epic to enjoy this very short conversation. And it is because the wisdom in it is so universal, almost anybody could appreciate it because it applies to just the universalities of life. And that could be why it's so important and held in such high regard among Indian people and non-Indian people. And its lessons, people can study this single conversation for their entire life, and there's commentaries that are built on it, and it is just amazing. There's entire philosophical schools that have developed from these very few 150 pages in the translation that you can see on your screen. This translation is by Stephen Mitchell. It's just a very beautiful, very, very accessible translation. It's just written in modern English and just in a really pretty, accessible way. There are certainly more academic or more dense ones that are possibly closer to the original language. Without a doubt, I would include the Bhagavad Gita and the Dhammapada together for any list of the world's greatest literature or poetry. I absolutely would include these two books for similar reasons, but the Bhagavad Gita is different than the Dhammapada. So we can examine the scene of the battlefield as a historic event during war, or consider it as a metaphysical, spiritual warfare. Rather than warfare, it could be the quest for self-understanding. We see this battle play out, but during a pause in the middle of the battle, the two leading characters converse with each other. Metaphysically, they may not be the characters Arjuna and Krishna that are talking. They could be the voices of consciousness playing out in our own mind. This can happen many times a day without us even being aware of it. It's this profound application is what makes its influence for the Bhagavad Gita so far-reaching, because everybody has a spirit, right? So let's examine this conversation metaphysically. The soldiers are active and engaging in life and death situations, injury and victory, but they are not thinking because they are in a state of action. It's only two characters who have stepped away from this battle to think and discuss what's happening and why. How often in life, in our daily life, do we actually stop and think? That we let ourselves just simply make connections between our actions, or between our actions and thoughts, or even just between thoughts. I think a point of their debate is to show that it's actually difficult to consider our actions. We have to be self-aware to be able to do this, or to be mindful of them. We can see superficial contradictions, but perhaps it doesn't matter after all. And contradictory, there's a comfort in that in the grand scheme of things, nothing really matters. That's very profound. The second part of this video will briefly touch on some of the details of why this small book is so impactful. The battlefield is life when it's in motion. The two are the mind and the self in conversation. So we have the mind and the self. The self, I think, would be Krishna, would be the more higher level of the self. The battle is actually insignificant because the self is eternal. In other words, the spirit doesn't die. There's 5 yogas that are covered in this book. There's the action, which is mindful action. There's wisdom, which is the final goal of action. There's renunciation, which is why we should let go, and possibly the ability to let go. There's meditation, what it is, disciplining of the self, and how to, and devotion, maybe the highest yoga. And there's 3 kinds of faith that are mentioned in this: the guna, sattva, rajas, and tamas. Those would all be the key points as a summary for this. I hope this makes sense. I hope it's very interesting to you. And that's all. Thanks for listening. Bye, everyone.